Welcome to another episode of Mandiant's Defender's Advantage podcast. I'm your host, Luke McNamara, and I'm particularly excited for our episode today to commemorate that October is Cybersecurity Awareness Month, as I have two very special guests joining me. First, it's a privilege to welcome back to the podcast Kevin Mandia, CEO of Mandiant, now part of Google Cloud, who's taking over hosting duties today because our second guest, who we are very honored to have here with us, is the 7th Secretary of the Department of Homeland Security, Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas. Secretary Mayorkas, Kevin, great to have you both here today.
And Secretary, thank you so much for joining me. I want you to know I'm in my Halloween costume today. I'm dressed as a West Coast executive, and I really appreciate your time. I know you're in the middle of celebrating Cybersecurity Month. I would love to hear just what are you focused on as the head of Homeland Security during Cybersecurity Month?
So Kevin, thanks very much. And Luke, thanks for having me. First of all, I've got to start by thanking you, Kevin, for your leadership in advancing the cybersecurity, not just of industry, not just of your clients, but of this country. You're a critical partner of the Department of Homeland Security's through the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency. And the fact that you lend your expertise and time to our work for the benefit of the country is profoundly impactful and appreciated. I'm focused, we in the department are focused on a few things in Cybersecurity Awareness Month. One, that the cyber threat make sure that everybody understands that the threat is a persistent and central risk to any business. Number one. Number two, that a culture of cybersecurity must be instilled from the top of an organization. And three, that partnership is key. The private sector cannot do it alone. The government cannot do it alone. We all own the responsibility together, not just as employees of the organizations for which we work, but also individually in our personal lives.
That's a great message to me. Threat is persistent, culture comes top down, and it's team ball. I really love hearing that. You know, and I was on your website as well today in preparing for this interview, and I noticed you have a campaign, sir, called Secure Our World. Who is that meant for, and what's its goals?
So Secure Our World speaks to the fact that we're all in this together, and that security is the responsibility of everyone. So let's take companies, not just the personnel within the company, their employees, but also their vendors, their customers. You know this very well, Kevin, the adage, we're only as strong as our weakest link.
Right.
Connectivity requires all of us along the chain of our experiences to be cyber secure. So the companies, it's all in. Individuals, their families, the personal device safety, their social media usage, protecting personal information. So individuals also have a responsibility to be cyber secure. Lastly, and not completely, but I would say the technology manufacturers.
Right.
We have an initiative, and you know this very well, Secure by Design.
Right.
You know, we when we buy our vehicles, our automobiles, they've got their seat belts, they've got their airbags. The technology that is manufactured should come out of the box,
Right.
With security tools inherent in them. It cannot rest on the shoulders of our cybersecurity professionals alone.
Well, that's what I've noticed. And you're going right at the asymmetry of it all. It's amazing how one person on offense, because of some of the vulnerabilities we have to deal with on defense, that one person can create work for millions. And we're trying to close that gap on asymmetry, which brings me to, I wanted to pop the question, you know, all the buzz right now over the last 6 months and at the conferences we go to has been about artificial intelligence. I'd love to just hear some of your high level thoughts on how you think that might help the defense, how it might help address that gap of maybe workforce shortage, or address the gap of asymmetry between offense in the cyber domain and defense. Do you have any opinion one way or another on AI and its impact on cyber defense?
I will share with you. I have a great optimism about the utility of AI. Generative AI is, what is the rage now, of course. A great optimism about its utility in advancing our cyber defenses. And I also have great concern with respect to the potential of AI to really equip our adversary and create a greater challenge for us. When I was at the Munich Security Conference last year, I was meeting with the commissioner of the European Union, and the commissioner shared with me their dialogue with the mayor of a major city in the world. And 15, 20 minutes into that virtual dialogue, the commissioner learned that the mayor of that major city was indeed not the mayor of that major city, but a fake. And that's at a very high level of government.
Right.
We have a remarkably talented individual in the Department of Homeland Security, Eric Heisen, who comes from the private sector as our chief AI officer. The jewel thief that I am, I've brought in a AI and technology expert in Matt Ferraro from the private sector into our department. We are going to harness the capability of AI to advance our mission proactively, as well as to strengthen our defenses against the adversaries.
Well, I like hearing you talk about the workforce that you've attracted to help us defend the homeland. And that brings me kind of to a pivot on the Joint Cyber Defense Collaborative, or I love calling it JCDC, because it rocks. Do you have any opinions on over the last couple of years, the progress we have made? Because to me, it feels like we've made great progress between private and public, and actually in securing the nation. But kind of pivoting to JCDC and what it does, and some of the other portions of CISA, how do you feel we're doing?
I think we are advancing and have advanced tremendously. I was in the department when before CISA was created. NPPD was its predecessor, and that sort of that partnership, that model of partnership, was at a real nascent stage, and it is incredibly mature now. And the proof of it is, just for our viewing and listening audience, about a month ago, the leaders in the private sector met with leaders in the federal government on very sensitive and critical issues. And Kevin, you were around that table, and it was a small table.
Right.
And the stakes were and are high. And the fact that high-level government officials were meeting with leaders in the private sector to address the homeland and national security of the United States speaks to the power of the JCDC, the Joint Cyber Defense Collaborative, the model of a public-private partnership in sharing information, sharing capabilities, sharing defensive knowledge, threat intelligence, alike, I think speaks to how far we've come.
Absolutely. Being able to sit through the formation of JCDC, I personally feel privileged to work with Jen Easterly, the director at CISA, and the team there. And to expound upon that, this is the corpus of people, at organizations that discover the new and novel ways attackers are circumventing our common safeguards, as well as the organizations most responsible for doing what we call shields up in cyberspace, defending those who can't defend themselves as fast as possible. And I think the effort is working. And we see the government reaching in, giving us a focal point. Come to CISA when you see something. Let's reverse that, Secretary, to what can the private sector do? Like if you were talking to a CEO or the CIOs or chief information security officers at an organization, what sort of things might you say to them to get them leaning more into partnership with the government?
So I'll share this. I grew up in the federal government as a federal prosecutor, and when a bank robber, just when I did some of the more straightforward cases before I got into the major fraud work. The bank robber would rob a branch of a bank and then have to start at square one to rob the second bank, a whole new operation. In the cyber domain, we very well know that the ability to replicate the attack is really just a button. It's just another click of the button. And to avoid that replication, to avoid one harm reaching a second victim, it can be based on the sharing of information. If a company comes forward and shares with us the intrusion and the methodology, whether they discover it or we discover it or both together, then we can share that information throughout the ecosystem and prevent that replication from occurring. And the more we do that, the more we raise the cyber hygiene of the entire environment and protect one another. And so I think information sharing is key.
Absolutely. Yeah, you described the learning system that I first responded to a breach in 1995. And I remember going, who do I go to with this? There was no one to go to. There were no lawyers involved. And quite frankly, there wasn't a whole lot of business impact back then. But you come fast forward 28 years, I love to see that we now have centralized kind of the hub on the wheel with CISA, where we can bring corporate intrusions and we all learn and we can go shields up much faster. Quite frankly, we're reducing the window of exposure for the nation. As we look in, go ahead.
Kevin, sorry, you mentioned shields up.
Yeah.
And that's an extraordinary initiative that Kenny Easterly, the head of CISA, initiated. And it really, I want to just highlight that, because it speaks not only of the Joint Cyber Defense Collaborative, the sharing of information domestically, but the sharing of information internationally. Shields Up was the initiative that Jen created in the wake of the unprovoked Russian aggression against Ukraine. It was, we were worried as the United States stood by our ally Ukraine. We were very worried about Russian cyber retaliation against us. And so we sent a message to the domestic community to put shields up, to guard against cyber attacks. It proved very successful, and it proved very successful in also equipping and enabling Ukraine in defending against Russian direct cyber attacks. And that sort of joint cyber defense collaborative has got international reach now.
Well, that's a great point. And for the, even the next level down, we had, folks from Mandiant, folks from Google, folks from many other organizations in cybersecurity, in Slack channels, actively communicating so that as we saw cyber activity in Ukraine, in theater, everybody was exposed to the new and novel things right away. And then, quite frankly, we were prepared as a homeland to defend against those things. So we built a hyper attentive learning system. And my gut is that won't be the last time we do that. But I would ask then, just pivoting off of that, Secretary, what lessons have we learned from Ukraine and how they're defending their nation during conflict in the cyber domain?
You used the word symmetry or asymmetry earlier, Kevin. And we are increasingly in a world where what was traditionally symmetrical warfare, kinetic to Connecticut, is no longer the case. There's a great deal of asymmetry where the kinetic sees a response that is a cyber, or a cyber attack can yield a kinetic response. The rules of engagement are very different. The landscape is much more diverse than ever before, and we're very attentive to the terrorist attacks against Israel and the conflict that has arisen from that. And we are looking not only at air, sea, and land, but we're also, of course, taking a look at the cyber domain and the borderless nature of it.
Right. And so you had mentioned earlier, you attracted some great personnel to look at AI and welcome it as a technology that can advance defense, but also recognize, hey, every technology advancement we ever make for the good of mankind gets leveraged by bad folks. And I know you know that as a former prosecutor. But looking at that workforce shortage, do you have any comments for the cybersecurity leaders out there and how they can address the shortage of cybersecurity professionals?
I think that comes at a very early stage. We have got a few things. Number one, we're always recruiting here in the Department of Homeland Security and in the federal government. We want to attract the best and the brightest in cybersecurity, but we are also working to ensure that the basic curriculum, even at an early age, includes technological development, cybersecurity, and the like. We've got to make it a part of the curriculum as early as possible in someone's arc of education.
Absolutely. So in other words, how early is early? 8th grade, 9th grade, sooner?
I as a father whose daughters yearn for the iPhone at an incredibly early age, I don't think it's, kids develop a facility younger than 7th, 8th grade, and therefore I think the education should begin sooner as well.
And what better way to learn early and then defend the nation later in your career? Sir, we've covered an unbelievable amount of territory in just over 15 minutes. This is the final question from me, and it's exciting to speak with you and see the great advancements we've made at DHS as well as within CISA and see all the involvement. Maybe just finish with, what's the future of DHS's cybersecurity efforts? What are some of the things we can look forward to?
So Kevin, the advancements we've made would not be possible without the partners we have. And therefore, I want to thank you. I think that the cybersecurity threats are only going to increase. I think they're going to increase in frequency and increase in gravity and sophistication. We are coming up in 2024 in an election year. Adverse nation states are going to increase their cyber activity. At the same time, we're going to strengthen our cyber partnerships, public, private, and international. The work that CISA and others are performing is extraordinary. We also have a national cyber director in the White House. We have an extraordinary individual in the National Security Council in Ann Neuberger. We've got amazing talent across the enterprise, and I think the partnership is only going to get stronger, and our capabilities are only going to increase in sophistication as well. But the landscape is going to be a charged one, and we all have to be vigilant, and we all have to work together.
And there's the call to action. Never rest. The threat is always persistent. Secretary Mayorkas, thank you so much for joining us today. And Luke, I'll pass it back to you for any final comments or remarks.
Thanks so much.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Kevin. Thank you, Secretary Mayorkas, for a great discussion. For those listening, we'll include links in the show notes to those relevant pages on the Department of Homeland Security website that Secretary Mayorkas mentioned, discussing those initiatives. And once again, thank both of you for your time and take care.
Thank you.